I talked about in my update video a couple weeks ago now about how there were certain topics that I just have been staying away from because I didn't know if the juice was worth the squeeze. I didn't know if I felt like offending people. And honestly, this is one of those videos that I've been thinking about making for a while. And I want you to know that I don't do this willy-nilly. I'm not over here like, I can't wait to make this video calling out worship theologians in the modern church. I don't take pleasure in this, but it needs to be talked about. And so I want you to hear my heart in this, is that I pray for these people that I'm about to talk about. And the only reason I'm doing it is because they aren't somewhere off in a corner just teaching something in their own church. All right? Here's my rule, and this applies to me as well. People can criticize me all they want. Once you make the decision to enter in to a leadership, teaching, influential position in the wider church, once people from my church start listening to your music, once worship leaders I know are impacted by your teaching, then I get to talk about what you teach, all right? You're not some random Sunday school teacher in some little country church that I'm picking on. Let me talk about what I'm talking about now. With that preface, all right? I don't hate these people. I want them to see the truth, and honestly, I want them to see the truth, but I want modern worship leaders to understand a very real theological problem in the church right now. Let me stop beating around the bush. I think it was like a year ago now, maybe a little bit longer than that, Matt Redman put out an article, I can't remember, I think it was on Christianity Today, and the title was something along the lines of worship leaders need theologians. I think that's what it was, something like that. And by the way, I said I've been avoiding talking about this topic, and I even actually made sort of a positive video about the article and just said, yeah, I agree with Matt Redman on that. But ultimately, the article, while I'm sure it expressed Matt Redman's heart, the article was really like an invitation to come to this theology conference for worship leaders called the Worth Conference. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe you've gone to it. And maybe you can say, Spencer, you're wrong in your perceptions, but I think fundamentally I'm not wrong in my perceptions. The thrust of the article was, worship leaders, you've been hired to lead. You've been hired primarily because you're good at music, but we need to focus on theology, which I fully agree, and I've been talking about that on my channel over the past few weeks. Here's the problem, and maybe it's the title of this video. I don't know what I'm going to title this video yet, but it's, who is teaching you theology? Okay, we recognize that we need theology as worship leaders. So let's put together a conference. Who are we going to invite? And I'll start, I guess, just with some good things, I guess. I mean, I know, and there have been several of these conferences now, and different people have been there at different conferences. Two of those people have been Glenn Packiam and David Taylor, who honestly I don't know that much about, but I have some people, other worship leaders who I respect their opinion, and I haven't looked into the teaching of Glenn Packiam and David Taylor, but from what I understand, they're solid. So we can celebrate that. We can celebrate that Glenn Packiam and David Taylor are there, I assume, teaching good theology. Let's move on to who else is there, though. And this one it's going to start with a small complaint and grow. Okay, who else is going to be there? Matt Redman's going to be there. I don't really have a problem with Matt Redman. And I feel like this is going to be weird if he sees this video. I don't even know if he would. I don't know if people watch these videos or not. But I'm willing to talk, guys. I know I'm just some random worship leader who happens to have a YouTube channel, but I'm willing to talk. So reach out to me if you want to talk. All right. The people say, why don't you do Matthew 18:20 and go one-on-one? Okay, like I said, we're past that point. You're a public figure teaching publicly. I can talk about that publicly. I don't really have a problem with Matt Redman. I just find it sort of interesting that it would be like we're having a theology conference and I'm going to be there. I don't know if he was teaching there or not, so I can't speak to this, 100%. But didn't you just write an article about how your theology isn't up to par and you need theologians to help? Maybe he's just leading worship there and he's not teaching. I don't know. I just feel like that needs to be pointed out. I don't know how the conference was run. Maybe he didn't teach, but if you just wrote a whole article about how worship leaders were hired for music and you feel like your theology isn't up to par, maybe you shouldn't be teaching at a theology conference for worship leaders. Maybe he didn't. I don't know. So we'll start with that. Who else is invited to teach at these theology conferences for worship leaders? David Funk and Josh Baldwin. And here's where I'm like, okay, we're slipping a little bit further down because here's Bethel now. Bethel's influence. I don't like Bethel's theology. I don't think it's healthy. I think every time I watch their service and they do their giving statement or whatever they call it, where it's like, we're believing for checks and more checks and checks in the mail and favorable settlements and inheritances, so on and so forth. Seems to me to be blatant prosperity theology, even if you want to soften it and say, well, God's going to give all these things so that we can give it back to him. And I don't need to rehash all of the problems with Bethel, which are plethora. And I know some people are not going to agree with me on that. So, okay, hold on, because it gets worse. All right, worse than Bethel, yes. It gets worse than Bethel. So David Funk and Josh Baldwin are there. I hope they're not teaching. If I had worship leaders at my church that I was sending, I don't want them teaching my worship leaders' theology. I trust Glenn Packiam and David Taylor to teach theology. Maybe Matt Redman will get some things right if he's there teaching theology. David Funk and Josh Baldwin, no thank you. But wait, there's more. And maybe this one isn't quite as bad, but I'll just throw this one in as well. I saw that Evan Wickham is going to be there. And mind you, I don't know that much about Evan Wickham. I have nothing against him personally. But recently, and this is something that needs to be brought up, and I know this is going to seem almost like a conspiracy until you see all the pieces put together, but I've noticed recently, first of all, Evan Wickham is Phil Wickham's brother. And if you haven't noticed recently, the side tangent, but it's related, Phil Wickham has been wearing what appears to be a miraculous medal of Mary, which is a Catholic thing that was sort of, I guess, blessed or acknowledged because of a Marian apparition, from my understanding. And what does it say on the? I gotta look this up. What does the miraculous medal of Mary say? It says something about praying to Mary. That one's not in English. Here it is. O Mary, conceived without sin, pray for us who have recourse to thee. Now, I thought, let me just read that again and let you see how strange that is for a Protestant worship leader to be wearing. A miraculous medal says, O Mary, conceived without sin, pray for us who have recourse to thee. At first I thought, surely Phil Wickham can't be wearing that. And I promise this ties into Evan Wickham somehow. Surely he can't be wearing that. That's weird for a Protestant worship leader, one of the main Protestant worship leaders, which is why I'm bringing it up. This isn't some random guy in a church down the street that nobody's heard of. In his Instagram videos, I don't know if he's worn it in a music video or not yet. I feel like he wore it at Charlie Kirk's memorial. He's wearing a medal that says Mary was conceived without sin and asking her to pray for him. And maybe he has a different medal. I don't know. But at the end of the day, I'm pretty sure it's the miraculous medal of Mary. How does that relate to Evan Wickham? And why is it a problem that Evan Wickham is at this theology conference for worship leaders? It's because then I put the pieces together because for some reason it popped up on my YouTube feed, a podcast that Evan Wickham was on recently that was about how his wife, and this is a terrible story and I'm sorry for it, she was pregnant and was at a hospital having some problems, and she felt comforted by the spirit of Mary. Okay, maybe we're just seeing things wrong, right? But then the story continues, and she tells him this when they're on a retreat. This is all in the podcast, by the way. They go on a retreat to a Benedictine Catholic monastery, and she was afraid to tell him about this Marian appearance that she had. But now she's at this Catholic monastery, and she tells him about it, and they're not sure what to make of it. And if it was me, I would say, well, let's go to the Bible and see what it says. Let's understand that we're Protestants, and we don't believe that Mary was conceived without sin, and we don't believe that Mary is appearing to people today. But no. He says, well, maybe I should ask the Catholic monks about that. And then he's like, I went and got a rosary, went out into the wilderness, and started praying the rosary, and I realized that it's actually not that bad, even though the rosary is directed to Mary. This is a problem, all right? It is a problem for Protestant worship leaders to adopt Catholic understandings because there was a reason that the Reformation happened, and one of the reasons had to do with Mary and how she wasn't conceived without sin, because no one is conceived without sin. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Even Mary. I know, man, it's like, I know what's going to happen. I know what's going to happen. Catholics are going to show up in the comment video of this, or the comments of this video. So prepare yourself to see Catholic comments down below. It's almost like, what was that old game where you went into the bathroom and you turned the lights off and you looked in the mirror and said Bloody Mary 3 times and she showed up or something like that. It's the same way on YouTube. You mention the word Catholic and Mary and start talking about it, and if you say it enough, they'll show up in the comments below. All right, I'm not talking to you Catholics, all right? I'm talking to Protestants who know that it's wrong to pray to Mary and to ask her to pray to you, because we are Protestants who do not believe that Mary is some intercessor between us and Jesus. We don't believe that she needs to placate his wrath, because that's not how it works. Jesus has propitiated our sin, the wrath of God towards it. We don't need Mary, all right? We can honor Mary as the mother of God and hold her in a certain regard for that, but as Protestants, we're not praying to her, and we aren't wearing a miraculous medal of Mary, and we aren't going out into the wilderness praying the rosary and thinking it's okay. And once again, if that's all it was, and it was just like Evan Wickham wants to go out and do that on his own, I don't have anything to say about that. But when that is coupled with, okay, now we're going to invite these people to teach theology at a worship conference, I'm going to say something about it, because that's weird. And it's okay to say that it's weird. All right, it is weird for a Protestant worship leader to wear a miraculous medal of Mary, which promotes praying to Mary, and all of the Catholic theology that underlies that. It is weird for a Protestant pastor to go to a Catholic monastery to prepare for the next year of their church, hoping they get some insight from God, and they end up going out into the wilderness praying the rosary. That's weird. And I don't want you teaching theology to the worship leaders that I know or the worship leaders in my church, and I'm not in charge of all the worship leaders in the world, but I'm saying that's weird. But wait, there's more. Because it's like, okay, well, maybe he just got that wrong. Who else is at these conferences? Well, we have somebody who maybe is sympathetic towards the rosary and praying to Mary, doesn't think that it's that big of a deal, but then we have Matt Maher. And mind you, like I said, I don't hate these people. I'm speaking specifically of their theology. Matt Maher is a dyed-in-the-wool Catholic. And what I saw a year or two ago, I cannot unsee. And frankly, I've stopped singing the song, Lord, I Need You, because of this. I saw Matt Maher leading worship at the National Eucharistic Conference, I think it was called. And it was a live stream that popped up on YouTube, and I was like, okay, this is a Catholic conference. I'm pretty sure that's what it was called. It's about the Eucharist, which I understand that Catholics have a very different understanding of the Eucharist than Protestants. And by the way, this isn't something controversial to say that. I'm not sure why we think this is controversial. Right? They have a different understanding of the Eucharist. And what I saw was Matt Maher, leading worship as the Eucharist was carried in to this conference. And people were worshiping the Eucharist. And I understand why they're doing it, because they think that the bread and the wine are the body and blood of Jesus. I understand that. And once again, I'm not really trying to convince Catholics that that's not right, even though I don't think it is right. I'm saying if you're a Protestant worship leader, one of the problems that was addressed in the Reformation, which is where Protestants come out of, we aren't a part of the Catholic Church because the Reformation happened. One of the problems has to do with worship and the way that worship was being done. One of those things was our understanding of communion / the Eucharist, transubstantiation, consubstantiation, so on and so forth. And so I don't want Matt Redman, a dyed-in-the-wool Catholic, teaching my worship leaders, which I don't own you as a worship leader. I'm just saying, if I had worship leaders at my church, I'm not sending them to this conference. Because I don't want a Catholic teaching my people about how to worship, because we worship in a different way. And by the way, Catholics shouldn't want Protestants teaching them how to worship either. There's a reason the Reformation happened. There's a reason Protestants split from the Catholic Church 500 years ago. There's a reason for it, and nobody remembers it. So, there's another problem. And then let's get, I suppose, to the final problem. And this is something I've been wanting to talk about once again on my channel, but I was afraid that it's going to offend people, but I'm not worried about offending people because this is the truth. Who else was at this conference? Mind you, it's marketed, I'm pretty sure I saw the word Trinity on the website. Something about Trinitarian worship or something like that. And I'm like, that sounds good. Then I look at who's going to be there, and who's there? Charity Gale. Now, if you don't know about Charity Gale, once again, I don't hate these people. I'm not saying I hate these people. I'm talking about their theology. Charity Gale grew up in the UPCI, United Pentecostal Church International. I'm pretty sure I got that right. Either way, she's a oneness Pentecostal, or at least she was. I haven't been able to confirm this, and it seems like nobody has been able to, because it almost feels like she's trying to hide this part of her past. But She grew up in her, parents, grandparents' church, I forget what it is, and it was a Oneness Pentecostal church. And this used to be on her website. It's not there anymore. So I can only hope and pray that she's moved away from that. And now, by the way, if you don't know what a Oneness Pentecostal is, they deny the Trinity, which is a heresy that has already been dealt with in church history. And for the longest time, we've acknowledged that it's a heresy to deny the Trinity and to say that God simply reveals himself in different modes, all right? It's modalism, that God reveals himself as the Father, reveals himself as the Son, reveals himself as the Spirit, but is not three persons. He's just one person and reveals himself in different ways, all right? And if you don't know why that's a problem, then I don't have time to explain it in this video, but it's a problem. It's a heresy that has already been pointed out in church history, and most people would have a problem with that. And so my point is, I pray that she's not still a Oneness Pentecostal. But when you come from that background, and I'm pretty sure your first album had overtly Oneness Pentecostal theology in it, implicit in the lyrics. Something about baptized in the water, I forget the whole context. If you aren't a Oneness Pentecostal anymore, I'm going to say that if you were previously a Oneness Pentecostal and you aren't anymore, then you need to come out explicitly and say, no, I now wholeheartedly affirm the Trinity. I don't believe that God simply reveals himself as the Father and reveals himself as the Son and reveals himself as the Spirit, but I believe that God is three in one. And I haven't heard that from her. And so until I hear that from her, I'm going to assume she's still a Oneness Pentecostal. I'm going to assume when she still participates at the Pentecostals of Alexandria, which is a Oneness Pentecostal church, their conference, a year ago, pretty sure that's what I saw. Correct me if I'm wrong in any of this. I'm willing to be corrected. I don't want her to be a Oneness Pentecostal. I want her to be a functioning member in the Church of Orthodoxy, not Orthodox Christianity, but as opposed to, well, I guess it moves beyond heterodoxy at that point because it's just heresy. I would welcome her with open arms. Come, Charity Gale. Believe in the Trinity, an essential doctrine of the Christian faith. But she's there. Do I want Charity Gale teaching worship leaders about worship theology? No, I don't. And so my question is, okay, maybe our theology is just so terrible as worship leaders that we don't even see that these things are a problem. And I don't know what the solution is, though. I don't know what the solution is. When you say we need help with theology, and then the person who puts together the theology conference invites Glenn Packham and David Taylor, thumbs up, has himself there. Maybe he's not teaching, I don't know. Matt Redman, were you teaching there? Because you admitted that your theology wasn't good and it needed to improve, or it wasn't developed, perhaps. And then invites David Funk and Josh Baldwin from Bethel, and then invites Matt Maher, a Catholic, and then invites Charity Gale, a Oneness Pentecostal, potentially. I haven't been able to confirm that, but I'm saying if you grew up in the Oneness Pentecostal church, it would be nice to know that you're not a Oneness Pentecostal anymore and that you affirm the doctrine of the Trinity. Can you do that? Somebody, in an interview, I've seen so many interviews with her, somebody ask her point blank, I want to know, do you believe in the Trinity or do you not believe in the Trinity? Because that's going to affect whether I listen to you or not. It's not an unreasonable question. They invite Evan Wickham, who apparently has a favorable view of praying the rosary. Who's teaching the theology? Okay, thumbs up, we agree that we need theology as worship leaders. We need to grow in it. These aren't the people I'm asking to teach me theology. That's why I wouldn't go to the conference. If you've been to the conference, tell me otherwise. I'm willing to listen. All right? I'm just pointing out what I see. I'm all for growing in our theology. I just don't think that these people are the ones to teach us. And I don't know what else to say about it, but I don't know if I have a solution right now. I'm just pointing out things that I think are weird. And hopefully on the rest of my channel, there'll be solutions to these sorts of things. But it needs to be said. So there, I said it. Once again, I'll say it one more time. I don't hate these people. I welcome them with open arms. If their theology is good, because we don't just unite around an arbitrary unification for the sake of ecumenism. We unite around the truth of the gospel. And it's been long established 500 years ago that the Catholic Church and the Protestant Church have different gospels. We shouldn't be working together. We have a different gospel. It's been established that you deny the Trinity. It's an essential of the faith. You shouldn't have fellowship with people who deny the Trinity. I don't know. Who's teaching you theology? Where are you getting your theology from? Do you even know how to think through these things? If not, you need to develop your theology, but you need to make sure you're getting it from the right sources. And until I see you in the next video, keep growing in your theology from the right people, learning from the right people, and keep leading worship well.